Nobody from my family came to my graduation. Not my mother, who had promised 3 times that she would be there early enough to take pictures. Not my father, who had told me he was proud of me in the same tired voice he used when he wanted a conversation to end. Not my brothers, who had joked about embarrassing me by cheering too loudly when my name was called. Not even my sister Lauren, although I should have known better than to expect her to show up for anything that did not somehow make her the center of attention. They all went to Lauren's barbecue party instead. I found that out while standing in a hallway outside the auditorium, wearing a black graduation gown that still had creases from the package. My cap was tucked under one arm, my phone in the other hand, and a small bouquet of white lilies sat on the chair beside me. I had bought the flowers myself that morning because some small, foolish part of me wanted pictures that looked normal. I wanted one photo where I was smiling between my parents, one where my mother cried because her oldest daughter had finally done it, one where my father placed a hand on my shoulder and said something that felt real. I had spent 6 years earning that degree. 6 years of night classes, weekend shifts, cheap meals, unpaid bills, and telling myself that it would all be worth it when I walked across that stage. I had worked at an accounting office during the day and taken forensic accounting courses at night. I had studied in my car between shifts. I had written papers at 2 a.m. while Lauren borrowed money for hair appointments, and my mother told me not to make a face because your sister has always needed more support than you. That was the sentence my mother used for everything. Lauren needed more support when she failed a class because the professor didn't understand her learning style. Lauren needed more support when she wrecked my father's car and blamed a pothole. Lauren needed more support when she quit 3 jobs in 1 year because every boss was apparently jealous of her potential. And I, somehow, was always the one strong enough to wait, strong enough to forgive, strong enough to give up whatever I had earned. But this was supposed to be different. 2 months before graduation, I sent the date to our family group chat. My mother replied with a row of heart emojis and wrote, "We wouldn't miss it." My father sent a thumbs up. My brother Jason joked that he would bring an air horn. My younger brother Caleb asked if there would be food afterward. Lauren did not answer until the next day, when she wrote, "So proud of you, sis," followed by a selfie from her kitchen, as if even my graduation announcement needed her face attached to it. I ignored that. I wanted to believe them. A week before the ceremony, I reminded everyone again. My mother called me that evening, while I was ironing my dress. "Of course we're coming, Maya," she said. "Why do you keep asking?" "Because it matters to me," I told her. There was a pause on the other end, not long enough to be called silence, but long enough for me to hear what she did not say. Then she sighed. "You know we're proud of you. Don't be so sensitive." I should have known then. On the morning of graduation, I woke up before my alarm. For a few minutes, I just lay still and stared at the ceiling of my apartment. The room was small, the paint peeling near the window, my desk buried under textbooks I no longer needed. My gown hung on the closet door, and my cap sat beside my final tuition receipt, the one I had paid off 3 days earlier with money I had been saving for a better car. I made coffee, curled my hair, put on a navy dress, and checked my phone. There was one message from Mom. "Running a little behind. We'll meet you there." I smiled even though something in my stomach tightened. Running behind was normal for my family. Showing up late was still showing up. I told myself not to ruin the day before it began. By 11, I was outside the university auditorium. Families moved around me in bright clusters. Mothers adjusted tassels. Fathers held balloons. Grandparents took pictures with shaky hands. Younger siblings complained about the heat while secretly looking proud. Everywhere I turned, someone was being hugged, photographed, celebrated. I stood near the entrance and kept checking the parking lot. At 11:14, I texted my mother. "Where are you? Doors are opening." No answer. At 11:23, I called her. It rang until voicemail. At 11:31, Jason texted, "We're figuring it out. Don't stress." That was the first real warning. What does that mean? I typed back. He did not respond. The graduates were told to line up at 11:40. I moved with them, still glancing over my shoulder, still searching for my mother's red blouse or my father's gray jacket. I had reserved 4 seats through the guest system and sent them the tickets 3 times. I had even printed copies and left them in my parents' mailbox because my mother claimed digital tickets were too complicated. The usher at the entrance scanned my student ID and smiled. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I expected. Inside, the auditorium was loud with excitement. Rows of families filled the seats, waving programs and phones. I found the section where my guests should have been. 4 seats in the middle row were empty, perfectly empty. Not late empty, not someone just stepped away empty. Empty in a way that felt deliberate. I stared at them until the student behind me gently touched my elbow. "We're moving." I nodded and followed the line. While the dean gave the opening speech, I held my phone under my program and checked it again. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad, nothing from Lauren. Only a notification from my bank about my paycheck deposit and an email from Professor Walker reminding me to meet her after the ceremony. She had helped me apply for a fraud investigation internship with a private firm downtown, and she had said there might be news today. I should have been excited. Instead, I kept looking toward those 4 empty seats. When the first graduate's name was called, the crowd erupted. A family somewhere behind me screamed so loudly that everyone laughed. The graduate covered her face and cried as she walked across the stage. I clapped for her because she deserved it, but my throat burned. More names were called. More families cheered. Each time, I told myself that maybe my family had arrived, and I simply could not see them. Maybe they were standing in the back. Maybe my mother's phone had died. Maybe Lauren had gotten sick. Maybe there was traffic, an emergency, a mistake. Then my phone buzzed. For 1 second, hope rushed through me so strongly that I nearly dropped it. It was a message from Caleb. "Don't be mad, okay?" I stared at the words. Before I could reply, another message appeared. This one was from Jason. "Mom said we'll celebrate you later." Lauren's thing got bigger than expected. Lauren's thing. Not her wedding. Not a hospital emergency. Not a crisis. Her thing. I typed, "What thing?" Jason sent nothing back. My name was still 20 minutes away, but something inside me had already stepped onto a different stage. I opened Instagram with trembling fingers and searched Lauren's profile. Her story loaded slowly, then appeared in bright color. There was my mother, standing in Lauren's backyard, beside a table covered with trays of grilled ribs, corn, cupcakes, and expensive-looking flowers. My father was laughing near the grill. Jason held a beer and waved at the camera. Caleb was helping Lauren's fiancé Ryan hang a banner over the patio. The banner said, "Lauren's Big New Beginning." Music played in the background. People clapped. Lauren turned the camera toward herself, smiling with glossy lips and perfect curls. "Family means everything," she said to the camera. "I'm so grateful everyone showed up for me today." I watched the video twice because the first time my mind refused to understand it. Everyone showed up for me today. In the corner of the screen, my mother lifted a glass and kissed Lauren on the cheek. My chest went cold. I clicked through the next story. There were cousins, aunts, neighbors, my parents' friends. People who had told me they could not wait to see pictures from my graduation were standing under string lights in Lauren's backyard at noon on a Saturday, eating barbecue and celebrating something I had not even been told about. Then a final message came in from my mother. "Lauren needed us today. Don't make this about you." I sat there in my row of graduates, surrounded by applause, and for the first time all morning, I stopped hoping they would come. Because they had not forgotten. They had chosen. I lowered my phone before anyone around me could see my face change. The ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. Names were called. Families cheered. Cameras flashed. and every burst of applause felt like it was coming from another world. My mother's message stayed open on my screen beneath the program in my lap. "Lauren needed us today. Don't make this about you." That was the sentence that explained my entire life in one line. Lauren needed them. I was expected to understand. Lauren had feelings. I had responsibilities. Lauren's disappointments became family emergencies, while my achievements were treated like private hobbies I should be proud of quietly. Even on the day I earned the degree I had fought for alone, my mother still managed to make me sound selfish for noticing the empty seats. Lauren was 2 years younger than me, but in our family, she had always been treated like the child everyone had to protect. When we were little, if I fell and scraped my knee, Mom told me to rinse it off. If Lauren cried because she lost a toy, the whole house stopped until someone found it. I used to think that was normal because she was younger. Then we got older, and the rules never changed. In high school, I saved for months to buy a used laptop for my classes. 2 weeks later, Lauren spilled soda on hers and cried until Mom came into my room and said, "Let her borrow yours for a while. You're better at managing things." That while lasted almost a semester. When I got accepted into a summer academic program, Dad said the fee was too much. 3 days later, they paid for Lauren's cheer camp because she had already told her friends she was going. Mom said Lauren needed confidence. I apparently needed to be practical. By the time we were adults, everyone knew their role. Lauren asked, and people adjusted. I asked, and people explained why I should not need so much. When Lauren dropped out of college after 1 semester, Mom called it finding her own path. When I took night classes while working full-time, Mom said, "Don't exhaust yourself trying to prove something." When Lauren quit jobs, her bosses were unfair. When I missed one family dinner because of an exam, I was becoming cold. Still, I kept showing up. I answered when Mom called. I sent money when Dad said a bill was tight. I picked Lauren up after fights with boyfriends. I helped her rewrite resumes she never used. I told myself being the reliable one meant something. Maybe one day they would see me. Maybe one day they would understand how hard I had worked without anyone making space for me. That day was supposed to be graduation. I looked toward the guest section again. The 4 seats I had reserved for my family remained empty, neat and untouched, like proof that hope could humiliate you if you held it too long. I had sent them the tickets 3 times. I had reminded them of the date. I had even printed copies for Mom because she claimed digital tickets confused her. They had not missed the ceremony by accident. They had planned around it. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jason. Mom said, "We'll celebrate you later." Lauren's thing got bigger than expected. Lauren's thing. That was all my graduation had lost to. Not a wedding, not a hospital emergency, not even a birthday. A thing. I opened Lauren's Instagram story because some part of me still needed to see it with my own eyes. The video loaded, bright and cheerful, almost cruel in how normal everyone looked. There was Mom in Lauren's backyard, holding a glass and laughing beside a table covered with ribs, corn, cupcakes, and flowers. Dad stood by the grill. Jason and Caleb were there with drinks in their hands. Cousins, neighbors, and even Aunt Denise moved through the frame, like this was an event nobody had dared to miss. Lauren turned the camera toward herself, smiling in a white sundress with perfect hair and glossy lips. "Family means everything," she said. "I'm so grateful everyone showed up for me today." I stared at the screen until the words stopped sounding like words. Everyone showed up for me today. The next story showed more of the backyard, and that was when the first strange detail registered. This was not a casual barbecue. There were rented tables with white cloths. A bartender stood behind a portable counter. A small valet sign sat near the driveway. Several men in suits stood near Ryan Whitmore's father, talking with the serious smiles of people discussing money. Ryan was Lauren's fiancé, and his family had the kind of wealth my mother treated like royalty. Ever since Lauren began dating him, Mom had become obsessed with appearances. She corrected Dad's grammar before dinners with the Whitmores. She told me not to wear my work shoes around them. She once said, People like that notice things, then looked at me as if I was one of those things. I had not been invited to this barbecue. That became clear as I watched the next clip. Everyone else seemed to know exactly why they were there. They gathered around Lauren while she stood beside a covered display on the patio, one hand locked with Ryan's. Mom was already wiping tears from her eyes before Lauren even spoke. "Okay, everyone," Lauren said, tapping a spoon against her glass. "I know today was supposed to be just a little barbecue, but it's actually more than that. Some of you know I've been working on something huge, something that's going to change my life." People clapped. Ryan kissed her temple. Mom looked like she was watching a miracle. Lauren smiled wider. "After today, everything becomes official." Official. The word landed wrong. It did not belong with barbecue sauce and cupcakes. It belonged to contracts, applications, signatures, approvals. After 6 years of studying accounting and fraud investigations, I knew the sound of a sentence hiding paperwork behind emotion. The video ended, but my unease stayed. I pulled down my notifications and noticed an email I had missed that morning. It had arrived at 9:42, while I was still curling my hair and pretending this day would be normal. The sender was my credit monitoring service, the one Professor Walker had insisted I sign up for after a lecture on identity theft. The subject line read, "New inquiry detected." My fingers went cold as I opened it. A business loan application had been submitted using my name, and the listed co-applicant was Lauren Collins. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The auditorium, the stage, the graduates sitting shoulder to shoulder, the families cheering from the rows behind us, all of it blurred into one low, distant noise. I read the email again, slower this time, hoping I had misunderstood. The alert showed the lender's name, the inquiry time, and the partial application details. My legal name, my current address, my social security number partially masked, Lauren's name beside mine like it belonged there. My first instinct was to call my mother. That embarrassed me even as my thumb hovered over her contact. After everything I had just seen, some trained part of me still wanted an explanation from the same woman who had taught me to doubt my own anger. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Lauren had listed me as a reference and the system had flagged it wrong. Maybe someone else had used both our names. Maybe there was one version of this day where my family had not abandoned me, used me, and celebrated behind my back all before noon. Then I looked again at the empty seats, and every excuse collapsed. The ceremony coordinator stepped near our row and whispered, "Next group, please stand." People around me rose, smoothing their gowns and adjusting their caps. My body moved with them before my mind caught up. I locked my phone, slipped it under my program, and stood in line with my legs feeling strangely hollow. Leaving would have been easy. I could have walked out, called the lender, driven straight to Lauren's house, and demanded answers while everyone was still eating under rented string lights. But if I left now, I would lose the one thing they had already tried to take from me that day. I had earned this walk. So I stayed. The line moved slowly along the side of the auditorium. Ahead of me, graduates whispered excitedly, checked their tassels, and waved at family members. One woman, 2 places ahead, blew a kiss toward the balcony. A man behind me laughed when his little boy shouted, "That's my dad," at the wrong graduate. The whole room was full of people being claimed by someone. I kept my eyes on the stage steps. When I reached the front, Professor Elaine Walker looked up from the faculty row and saw me. She was the first person all day who seemed to understand that something was wrong without asking me to explain it. Professor Walker taught forensic accounting like she was training people to see through polished lies. She was sharp, calm, and impossible to impress with excuses. In her class, I had learned that fraud rarely started with one dramatic crime. It started with entitlement, small permissions, and people who believed rules were for someone else. At the time, I had thought she was talking about companies. Now, I wondered if she had been describing my family. Professor Walker gave me a small nod, not cheerful enough to be fake, not concerned enough to draw attention, just a steady look that said, "Hold your ground." I held the program tighter and stepped forward when the announcer called the name before mine. Applause rose from somewhere near the back. The graduate crossed the stage, hugged a professor, and lifted her diploma cover toward her family. Then, the announcer glanced down at the list. Maya Collins. For one painful second, there was almost nothing. No scream from Jason, no whistle from Caleb, no proud laugh from my father, no sharp little cry from my mother pretending she had not expected to be emotional. Just the polite applause that universities give every graduate because silence would be too cruel. I walked anyway. The stage lights were brighter than I expected. They warmed my face and made it harder to see the audience, which was probably a mercy. I shook the dean's hand, accepted the diploma cover, and turned toward the photographer. My smile felt practiced at first, but then something shifted. I thought of the mornings I had opened the office before sunrise. I thought of every night I had driven home exhausted with accounting formulas playing in my head. I thought of the tuition payments, the secondhand textbooks, the meals skipped because rent was due, the exams I had passed without anyone asking how they went. This moment was not empty just because my family had failed to fill it. It was mine. When I stepped away from the dean, Professor Walker stood at the side of the stage. That was not part of the normal routine, and for a moment, I thought I had gone the wrong direction. Then the dean returned to the microphone. Before Miss Collins leaves the stage, I would like to recognize her as this year's recipient of the Walker Merit Award for Excellence in Fraud Examination. Maya completed her degree while working full-time and earned the highest score in her program's investigative accounting practicum. The applause grew louder this time, more real, more focused. I froze not because I hated attention, but because I had not known this was coming. Professor Walker stepped toward me with a certificate folder in her hands. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You earned every bit of this. Don't let anyone make today smaller." My throat tightened so quickly I could barely answer. "Thank you." "There's more," she said quietly. "The firm called this morning. They want you for the junior fraud analyst position, not the internship. Full-time, benefits, start date flexible." For the first time that day, I almost cried for a reason that was not humiliation. I had applied for an internship because I thought asking for more would be unrealistic. Professor Walker had pushed me to submit my practicum report anyway, the one where I traced a fake vendor scheme through altered invoices and shell accounts. I had spent weeks on it, not sleeping, barely eating, determined to prove I belonged in a field where people did not usually come from families like mine. The idea that someone had seen my work and chosen me on purpose felt almost unreal. Professor Walker touched my elbow gently. "Meet me after the ceremony. We'll talk." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, everything I had been holding back would spill out in front of the entire auditorium. As I left the stage, the applause faded into the next name. I returned to my row with the diploma cover in one hand and the award folder in the other. The empty seats were still there, but they looked different now. They no longer looked like proof that I was unworthy. They looked like evidence. Evidence that my family had chosen a backyard performance over the truth. Evidence that my mother had called Lauren's announcement a need and my graduation a problem. Evidence that while I was walking across a stage for fraud examination, someone in my own family had possibly used my identity for a loan. I sat down and finally turned my phone over. The screen lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls from Mom had become 12, then 18, then more appeared as the phone refreshed. There were messages from Jason, Caleb, and even my father, all vague and urgent in the same way people sound when they know too much but want you to ask the wrong question first. "Mom, call me now. Mom, this is serious. Mom, do not talk to anyone until you speak to me. Jason. Maya, just answer her. Dad, come by Lauren's when you're done. We need to clear something up." I looked at the credit alert again, then at Lauren's Instagram story still frozen on her smiling face. My hands had stopped shaking. That scared me a little, because anger usually made people feel hot, loud, uncontrolled. What I felt was colder than that. Cleaner. By the time the ceremony ended, I had stopped hoping for an apology. I wanted facts. Graduates stood, tassels were turned, caps flew into the air, and families rushed toward the aisles with flowers and open arms. I remained seated long enough to let the first wave pass. Then I picked up my diploma cover, my award folder, and the bouquet I had bought myself. When I walked out of the auditorium, sunlight hit the glass doors, and my phone buzzed again. This time, the number at the top of the screen made me stop. Mom's 45 missed calls. Underneath them was one final message. We need to talk. Urgently. I stood outside the auditorium with my diploma cover under one arm, my award folder pressed against my chest, and the bouquet I had bought myself hanging from my fingers. Around me, graduates were being swallowed into hugs. Parents cried into their children's gowns. Friends posed for pictures on the lawn. Someone's grandmother kept saying, "I knew you could do it," over and over like a prayer. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Mom. For a moment, I let it ring. I watched her name flash across the screen and thought about the 4 empty seats. I thought about Lauren's backyard, the white tablecloths, the bartender, the men in suits, the announcement, and the credit alert sitting in my inbox like a loaded weapon. Then, I answered. What happened? I asked. My mother did not say congratulations. She did not ask if the ceremony was over. She did not apologize for missing it. Instead, she exhaled sharply and said, "Finally. Maya, where are you?" I looked back at the auditorium doors. At my graduation. There was a pause, but not the kind that carried guilt. It carried irritation. "I know that," she said. "Are you done now?" The question was so cold that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because there was no gentler sound left in me. "Yes," I said. "I'm done." "Good. Come to Lauren's house right now." I shifted the bouquet to my other hand. "Why?" "Because we need to talk." "You already said that." "Maya, this is not the time for your attitude." My attitude. That was what she called it, whenever I responded like a person instead of a tool. Behind her voice, I could hear noise, music, people talking, someone moving dishes. Then, under all of it, Lauren crying. Not quietly either. She was making the kind of sobbing sounds she used when she wanted a room to know she had been wounded. "Is Lauren crying?" I asked. Mom lowered her voice. "Your sister is very upset." "I'm sure she is." "Do not start," Mom snapped. "You have no idea what is happening here." "I know a business loan application was submitted using my name." The background noise seemed to drop all at once. My mother said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then she said, "Where did you hear that?" Not, "What are you talking about?" Not, "That's impossible." Not even, "There must be a mistake." "Where did you hear that?" That told me more than any confession could have. I tightened my grip on the phone. "So it's true." "It is more complicated than that." "No, Mom. It's actually very simple. Either my name was used with my permission, or it wasn't." "Maya, lower your voice." I looked around. Nobody near me was listening. Everyone had their own families, their own flowers, their own beautiful little endings to care about. "My voice is not the problem," I said. Lauren cried louder in the background. I heard my father say something, then Jason's voice, then a man I did not recognize asking, "Is she on the phone?" My mother covered the receiver, but not well enough. "She knows about the inquiry," she whispered. A second voice, probably my father's, said, "Just get her here." Then Lauren sobbed. "She's going to ruin everything." My mother came back on the line. "Listen to me carefully. Nobody is trying to hurt you. Lauren put your name down because she trusted you. She thought you would support her." "That is not support. That is fraud." "Don't use words like that." "I'm using the correct word." "Maya," she said, and her voice changed. It softened in the way it always do when anger failed and manipulation took its place. "Your sister has worked so hard for this. Today is important to her. I looked down at the diploma cover in my hand. Today was important to me too. You know what I mean? No, I thought. I knew exactly what she meant. Lauren's important days belonged to the whole family. Mine were allowed to exist only if they did not inconvenience anyone else. I walked today, I said. Alone, my mother sighed, as if my pain was a bill she did not want to pay. We were going to celebrate you later. You chose her barbecue over my graduation. This was not just a barbecue. The words slipped out before she could stop them. I went still. What was it? Another pause. Maya, just come here. What was it, Mom? She did not answer directly. Ryan's family is here. There are investors here. The lender's representative is here. Lauren was supposed to finalize a few things today, and now there is a problem because you are not present. Because I was not present. I almost closed my eyes. They had planned this around my absence. They had known I would be at graduation. They had counted on it. What exactly did Lauren put my name on? I asked. It's temporary. That is not an answer. It is just to help her qualify. She needed a stronger financial profile, and yours is clean. You have good credit because you never take risks, and Lauren needed someone stable attached to the application. Someone stable. That was a nicer way to say someone useful. Did she sign my name? My mother's silence answered first. Then she said, she may have misunderstood how the form worked. I let out a breath. Lauren is 27. She knows how signatures work. She was under pressure. So she committed fraud under pressure. Maya, stop saying that word. People near the doors glanced in my direction. I stepped away from the crowd and moved toward a quieter path beside the auditorium, where a row of trees gave a little shade. My heart was beating hard now, but my voice stayed calm. That seemed to make my mother angrier. You need to come here and clear this up, she said. Tell them you agreed to help her. I didn't. You can agree now. No. The word came out small, but it changed the air between us. My mother did not respond right away. I could picture her standing in Lauren's polished backyard, one hand pressed to her forehead, surrounded by people she wanted to impress. For once, I was not a child in her kitchen being told to share, wait, forgive, understand. I was the missing signature, the clean credit, the person they had built their lie around. And I had said no. You don't mean that, Mom said. I do. If this falls apart, your sister loses everything. Then she should not have used my name. You are being cruel. No, Mom. Cruel was missing my graduation to celebrate the person stealing my identity. Her voice sharpened. Do not make yourself the victim in every situation. I looked at the flowers in my hand, the ones nobody had given me, and felt something inside me settle into place. I didn't make myself the victim, I said. You just got used to me staying quiet about it. Behind her, I heard a man's voice again, clearer this time. Margaret, we need an answer. The bank won't approve it without Maya. There it was. The truth. Spoken by someone who did not know he was being heard. The bank won't approve it without Maya. My mother hurriedly moved away from the voice. You need to come here now. Why? I asked, though I already knew. Because if you don't, Lauren's deal collapses in front of everyone. Not because Lauren had wronged me, not because my future was at risk, not because my credit, my name, and my legal safety had been dragged into something without my consent. Because Lauren might be embarrassed. I looked across the lawn and saw Professor Walker standing near the faculty exit, speaking with another professor. She noticed me and paused, as if she could read the decision forming on my face. I'm coming, I said. My mother exhaled in relief. Good. And Maya? What? Do not make a scene when you get here. Your sister has been through enough today. I looked once more at the auditorium, at the place where I had walked alone, and still earned applause. Then I said, "No, Mom, she hasn't." I ended the call before she could answer. A second later, another message came through from her. "Remember, family protects family." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I opened the credit alert, took a screenshot, forwarded it to myself, and walked toward Professor Walker. Because before I went to Lauren's house, I needed one person in my corner who understood exactly what a forged signature could destroy. Professor Walker did not interrupt while I explained. She stood beside the faculty exit with her black robe folded over one arm, listening the way she taught us to listen during interviews. No gasping, no dramatic reactions, no filling silence with guesses. I showed her the credit alert, Lauren's Instagram story, and the message from my mother telling me that family protected family. When I finished, she looked at the screen for a moment longer, then handed the phone back. "Do not sign anything," she said. I wasn't planning to. I mean anything. Not a statement, not a correction form, not a temporary authorization, not even a blank piece of paper someone tells you is just to confirm you were present. The warning made my stomach tighten. You think they'll try that? I think people who already used your information without permission will not suddenly become careful because you walked into the room. That was exactly why I had gone to her first. My mother knew how to pull guilt out of me. Lauren knew how to cry until everyone turned against the person who did not comfort her. My father knew how to stand quietly until his silence became pressure. But Professor Walker did not care about family habits. She cared about facts. She asked if I had called the lender yet. I told her no. She told me to call from the parking lot before going to Lauren's house and report that I had received an inquiry alert for an application I had not authorized. She said to keep the conversation short, request a fraud note on the file, and not confirm any details beyond my identity unless I was speaking to the lender's official fraud department. Then she made me forward the alert to a new email thread with myself, so there would be a time-stamped record before I arrived. "You can still choose how much you want to confront them today," she said. "But protect your name first." My throat tightened again, not from sadness this time. "Thank you." She gave me a firm look. "Maya, listen carefully. You are not overreacting. They may try to make you feel like a signature is a family favor. It is not. A signature can become debt, liability, litigation, and years of cleanup." I nodded. "And one more thing," she added. "Do not let the fact that they missed your graduation become the only issue. That hurt you, and it should have. But the loan is the danger. Stay focused." That sentence steadied me more than any comfort could have. I had spent my whole life being dragged into arguments where the real issue disappeared under accusations that I was too sensitive. This time, there would be a center. My name, my credit, my consent. In the parking lot, I called the lender from the number on its official website, not the contact listed in the email. It took 12 minutes, 2 transfers, and a security verification before I reached someone in fraud intake. I reported the inquiry as unauthorized. The woman on the line asked if I knew the co-applicant. I looked at the graduation cap on the passenger seat and said yes, she was my sister, but I had not agreed to any business loan and had not signed anything. The woman's tone changed from routine to careful. She placed a temporary hold note on the application and told me an investigator might follow up. By the time I ended the call, there were 7 new messages from my mother. "Where are you?" "People are waiting." "Maya, this is not fair to Lauren. Your father is getting upset. Please don't embarrass us." The last one was the most honest. I drove to Lauren's house, still wearing my graduation dress. I had taken off the gown because it was too hot in the car, but I left the cap and diploma cover on the passenger seat where I could see them. It felt important not to let their emergency erase the reason this day had begun. Lauren lived in a renovated craftsman house 10 minutes from my parents', though lived was generous. Ryan paid the mortgage while Lauren called it their shared investment. The street was packed when I arrived. Cars lined both sides. A valet stand had been set near the driveway, exactly like I had seen in the story. A young man in a black vest approached my car with a polite smile, then hesitated when he saw me pull into an open space myself. "I'm not staying long," I said. The backyard noise reached me before I opened the gate. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses, the low hum of people trying to sound important. When I stepped onto the patio, several conversations died at once. It would have been almost funny if I had not been so angry. My family had dressed for Lauren's event as if they were attending a garden engagement party. Mom wore a cream blouse and pearls. Dad had changed into a blazer. Jason and Caleb were in button-down shirts. Even Aunt Denise had on heels, though she always claimed she could not walk in them. They all turned toward me, and for a second I saw the calculation pass across my mother's face. Not concern, not shame. Calculation. I was not supposed to arrive looking like evidence. I still had my curled hair from the ceremony. My navy dress was simple but formal. The award folder was tucked under my arm, and the diploma cover rested against it. I had not planned the effect, but I could see people noticing. A few guests looked from me to my mother, then to Lauren, as if silently placing the pieces together. "Maya," my mother said quickly, crossing the patio. Her smile was tight enough to crack. "There you are." "There I am," I said. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Her eyes flicked toward the guests. "Not here." "Then where?" "Inside." Before I could answer, Lauren came through the open French doors. Her white sundress looked perfect, but her face was blotchy from crying. Ryan followed behind her, confused and tense. His father stood near the covered display on the patio with two men I recognized from Lauren's story. One held a leather folder. Another had the polished patience of someone who had paused a business discussion and expected it to resume. Lauren saw the diploma cover under my arm, and her mouth twisted. "You really had to bring that?" I looked at her. "I came from graduation." She crossed her arms. "You could have changed." The patio became even quieter. Ryan looked at me sharply. "Graduation?" I watched Lauren's face change. It was quick, but not quick enough. She had not told him. Maybe she had told him I could not come, because I was busy. Maybe she had told him I did not want to support her. Whatever version he had heard, it clearly had not included the truth that my entire family had skipped my ceremony to stand in his backyard. My mother moved between us. "This is not the time." "No," I said. Apparently the time was while my name was being used on a loan application. One of the men near Ryan's father straightened. My mother's face drained of color. "Maya," Dad warned quietly. I turned to him. "Did you know?" He looked away. That was enough. Lauren let out a sharp, wounded laugh. "Oh my God, are you seriously going to do this in front of everyone?" "You mean ask why my information is on your business loan?" "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After it was approved?" "You never support me," she snapped. "You always act like you're better than me because you finished school." I stared at her, stunned less by the accusation than by how easily she reached for it. I didn't even know this party was happening. Mom grabbed my wrist this time, hard enough that her nails pressed into my skin. "Inside. Now." I pulled my hand free. "Do not touch me." The man with the leather folder stepped forward. "Perhaps we should clarify this before anything else is discussed." My mother turned toward him with a desperate smile. "Mr. Alden, this is just a family misunderstanding." He did not return the smile. A family misunderstanding does not usually trigger a fraud hold. Lauren's eyes widened. "Fraud hold?" I said nothing. Mr. Alden looked at me. "Miss Collins, I'm the attorney representing the lender's closing review. We were told you were aware of the application and would be present to confirm your participation today." "My participation?" I repeated. Lauren's voice trembled. "Maya, please," Mom whispered. "Just say you agreed. We can fix the rest later." There it was. The whole reason for the calls, the panic, the urgent message. They had not needed me as a daughter. They had needed me as a witness to their lie. Ryan stepped away from Lauren. What does she mean, say you agreed? No one answered him. Mr. Alden opened the folder and removed a printed document. He did not hand it to me yet. He simply turned it enough for me to see the signature line at the bottom. My name was there. Not typed. Signed. A neat, careful imitation of my signature sat under a statement saying I agreed to serve as co-applicant and guarantor for Lauren's business loan. The backyard seemed to tilt slightly, but my voice stayed steady. Mr. Alden looked directly at me and asked, Miss Collins, did you personally sign these documents? The entire backyard waited for my answer. Lauren stood beside Ryan with both hands pressed to her stomach, as if she were the injured one. My mother's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. My father looked toward the grill, toward the fence, toward anywhere except me. For a moment, all I could hear was the low buzz of the patio lights and someone's glass being set down too carefully on a table. I looked at the signature again. It was close enough to fool someone who had only seen my name once or twice. The M had the same long first stroke. The C looped almost correctly. Whoever had copied it had taken their time. But it was too neat, too controlled, missing the quick downward slash I always made at the end. It looked like a performance of my signature, not my signature. No, I said. I did not sign that. Lauren made a small sound, almost a gasp. My mother stepped forward quickly. Maya, wait, she said. Before you say anything else, let's talk inside. There's nothing to talk about privately. There is, she insisted, lowering her voice. You're emotional right now. That word almost made me smile. Emotional. I had stood alone at graduation, discovered a loan application in my name, walked into a party where my own family had gathered to pressure me, and somehow my mother still thought the problem was my tone. Mr. Alden did not move. Miss Collins, for the record, you are stating that the signature on this document is not yours? Yes. Maya, my father said quietly. I turned to him. Did you watch her sign it? His face tightened. This isn't the way to handle this. That's not what I asked. He said nothing. Ryan looked from my father to Lauren. Lauren, what is going on? Lauren's eyes filled again, but this time, the tears did not fall immediately. She was deciding who the audience was. With family, crying had always worked. With attorneys and investors watching, she needed to look betrayed, not guilty. I thought Maya would help me, she said, her voice shaking. She always said family should support each other. I never said you could use my identity. I didn't use your identity like that. Then how did my signature get there? Her mouth opened, then closed. My mother grabbed my elbow and pulled me toward the French doors. Inside, now. I yanked my arm back. Stop touching me. Do you want to destroy your sister in front of everyone? She whispered. I want the truth in front of everyone. That is not truth. That is cruelty. No. Cruelty was building this entire day around a lie and expecting me to clean it up. My mother's eyes hardened. For a second, the soft, pleading mask disappeared, and I saw the woman who had always been underneath it. The one who did not ask me to sacrifice, but demanded it. You listen to me, she said under her breath. Your sister has investors here. Ryan's family is here. If you humiliate her now, there may be no fixing it. Then maybe she should have thought about that before signing my name. Lauren burst out. I was going to tell you after the approval. The sentence landed across the patio like a dropped plate. Ryan stared at her. After the approval? Lauren turned toward him, panicked. That came out wrong. Mr. Alden's expression did not change, but he closed the folder slightly, as if the conversation had already given him more than enough. I looked at Lauren. You were going to tell me after I was legally tied to your loan? It wasn't supposed to be permanent, she said quickly. Mom said once the business looked stronger, we could refinance and take your name off. I turned to my mother. You knew. My mother lifted her chin. I knew Lauren needed help. I knew you had the ability to help. And I knew you would make it difficult if we asked directly. A quiet murmur moved through the guests. Aunt Denise covered her mouth. Caleb looked down at his shoes. Jason muttered something under his breath, but for once, he did not joke. Ryan stepped away from Lauren completely. Your mother knew? Lauren reached for his hand. Ryan, please, this is just paperwork. No, he said, pulling back. This is a loan my father was about to connect our family name to. Ryan's father, who had stayed silent until then, looked at Mr. Alden. How much exposure are we talking about? Mr. Alden opened the folder again. The requested loan amount is $480,000, with Miss Maya Collins listed as co-applicant and personal guarantor. The number hit me harder than I expected. $480,000. My rent, my car, my savings, my new job, my clean credit, everything I had built piece by piece could have been dragged under by a business I had never agreed to join. I thought of my mother calling me selfish. I thought of Lauren smiling into the camera and saying family meant everything. I thought of the empty seats at graduation and realized those seats were not just neglect, they were strategy. They had needed me absent. If I was at graduation, I would not be at the party when the paperwork was discussed. If I was hurt, embarrassed, and desperate for approval, maybe I would come running when Mom called. If enough people were watching, maybe I would be too ashamed to say no. Professor Walker had been right. A signature was not a favor, it was a trap. Lauren started crying fully now. I had no choice. Nobody takes me seriously unless I have backing. Maya has perfect credit, and she never uses it for anything. It was just sitting there. I stared at her. My credit was not sitting there. It belongs to me. You always act like everything is so hard for you, Lauren snapped. Do you know how hard it is to be compared to you? Perfect Maya, responsible Maya, always working, always studying, always making me look bad. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. You think I was the favorite? You were the one everyone trusted. No, I said. I was the one everyone used. My mother pointed toward the house. Enough. We are going inside, and you are going to calm down. No. She blinked, as if the word did not make sense coming from me. I took out my phone and opened the screenshot of the credit alert. I already contacted the lender's fraud department before I came here. There is a hold note on the application. Lauren's crying stopped. My mother stared at me. You did what? I reported the inquiry as unauthorized. You had no right. That was the moment something inside me finally broke cleanly instead of painfully. I had no right? I repeated. To protect my own name? You should have spoken to us first. You had all morning to speak to me. You chose not to. Mr. Alden extended his hand. Miss Collins, may I see the alert? I hesitated only a second before showing him the screen. He did not take my phone, just read the details, then nodded once. This confirms what our system flagged, he said. The application cannot proceed today. Lauren whispered. No. My mother turned on him. There has to be a way to fix this. There is, Mr. Alden said, but it does not involve pressuring someone to validate a signature she disputes. Ryan's father looked at Lauren with open disgust now. Did you forge her name? Lauren's face crumpled. I was trying to save my future. I looked down at the diploma cover still tucked under my arm, then back at my sister. No, I said quietly. You were trying to steal mine. For a moment, nobody moved. Lauren stared at me like I had slapped her. My mother looked furious, but there was fear under it now. Ryan's father had stepped back from the patio table, his expression closed. Mr. Alden kept the folder in his hand, no longer treating the situation like a delayed signing but like a legal problem that had already begun. Lauren wiped her cheeks and shook her head. That is such a cruel thing to say. I looked at her and said, You signed my name to a loan for almost $500,000. She swallowed hard. I said I was going to fix it later, I answered. You were going to tell me later. That is not the same thing. Mom moved toward me again, but this time she stopped before touching my arm. She had finally realized I would not let her drag me inside. Maya, listen to me. Your sister made a mistake, but this does not have to ruin her life. We can still handle this quietly. I looked around the backyard. The guests who had been laughing 20 minutes ago were now silent, watching the Collins family become something uglier than the polished version my mother had tried to present. The rented tables, the flowers, the covered display, the expensive food, all of it suddenly looked ridiculous. They had built a stage for Lauren's success, and now the truth was standing in the middle of it wearing a graduation dress. Quietly means you want me to lie, I said. Mom's face tightened. It means I want you to think about the family. I held her gaze. I did, for years. Dad finally stepped forward, speaking in the low voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable without actually taking a side. Maya, nobody wanted things to get this far. I turned to him. But you let them. He flinched. Your mother thought. I cut him off. I'm asking what you thought. Dad looked at the folder in Mr. Alden's hand, then at Lauren, then at me. His silence was familiar, but this time, it did not protect him. It exposed him. You knew, I said. Dad rubbed a hand over his mouth. I knew Lauren needed help. I shook my head. That's not an answer, he sighed. I knew your name was on the application. I didn't know she had already signed. Mom snapped. David. I looked at my father and felt the final small piece of hope I had kept for him disappear. He had not been fooled. He had not been absent. He had simply chosen the safer side, like he always did. Lauren rushed toward him. Dad, please. Tell her I didn't mean it like that. Dad placed a hand on her shoulder but did not look at me. That was answer enough. Mom turned back to me. You have always been good with paperwork. You know how to fix things. Just help us get through today, and then we will figure out the rest. I said, there is no us in this. She narrowed her eyes. You don't mean that. I answered, I do. You are angry because we missed your ceremony, Mom said. I stared at her. You still think that is the only reason I'm upset? She sighed, as if she were trying to tolerate me. It hurt you. Fine, I understand that. We should have handled the timing better. I repeated, the timing? She said, we had obligations here. I almost laughed. You had a daughter graduating. Her voice sharpened. And we had another daughter trying to build a future. Why does everything have to become a competition with you? The old Maya would have argued. She would have explained that she did not want competition, only fairness. She would have listed every missed event, every unpaid debt, every time Lauren's crisis became more important than her life. But Professor Walker's warning returned to me. Stay focused. This is not about competition, I said. This is about a forged signature. Mr. Alden nodded slightly, as if approving the correction. Mom noticed and lowered her voice. Maya, please. If you confirm you agreed, the loan can still move forward. Lauren can refinance later. We can make sure your name comes off. I said, no. Lauren's face twisted. You don't even need the credit. You have your job now, your degree, your perfect little life. I have one chance, and you're taking it from me. I answered, I'm not taking anything. I'm refusing to give you something that was never yours. You always do this, Lauren cried. You act calm, so everyone thinks I'm crazy. I looked at her and said, no, Lauren, you act helpless, so everyone forgets you're responsible. Ryan made a sound under his breath and looked away from her. That small movement frightened Lauren more than anything I had said. She grabbed his arm. Ryan, don't listen to her. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of me. Ryan looked at her hand on his sleeve. Did you sign her name? Lauren's mouth trembled. I was under pressure. He pulled his arm back slightly. That is not an answer. I heard my own question in his voice and felt a strange sadness. For the first time, someone outside the family was seeing the pattern in real time. Lauren did not answer questions. She performed around them until someone else changed the subject. Mom stepped in. "Ryan, this is a private family matter." Ryan's father spoke before Ryan could. "Not anymore. My family was asked to participate in this investment. We were told the financial backing was clean." Mom insisted, "It is clean. Maya is just upset." Mr. Alden closed the folder. "Mrs. Collins, I would strongly advise everyone to stop minimizing this." The warning cut through the patio. My mother's cheeks flushed, but she finally fell silent. I looked at Mr. Alden. "What happens now?" He answered. "The application remains on hold. Given your statement, the lender will likely request a formal written dispute and may refer the matter for further review. You should place a fraud alert with the credit bureaus and keep records of all communication." Lauren whispered, "You can't." I turned to her. "I can." She shook her head. "If you do that, I lose everything." I said, "You should have thought of that before you risked everything I had." Mom's voice broke into something almost desperate. "Maya, I am begging you. Just this once, put your sister first." That sentence settled over me like the ending of a long, exhausting book. Just this once. As if my entire childhood had not been built on those words. Just this once, let Lauren have the bigger room. Just this once, skip your program because cheer camp matters to her. Just this once, lend her money. Just this once, don't make a fuss. Just this once, be the daughter who understands. I looked at my mother and realized she truly believed this was the first time she had asked too much of me. That was the depth of her blindness. "No," I said again, louder now. "I am done putting Lauren first." Lauren stared at me with wet, furious eyes. "You came here to punish me." I answered, "I came here because you used my name." She snapped. "You could have helped me." I said, "You could have asked." Her voice dropped. "You would have said no." I nodded. "Yes." And that should have mattered. The silence after that was different. It was not just shock. It was recognition. Everyone there understood what she had admitted. Lauren had not forgotten to ask. She had skipped asking because my consent was inconvenient. My mother tried one final time. "Maya, if you walk away from this, do not expect this family to forget it." I held her gaze. "I'm counting on that." Dad said my name softly, almost pleading, but it came too late. I had spent years waiting for him to say it when I needed defending. Hearing it now did nothing. I turned to Mr. Alden. "Please send me whatever formal steps I need to take. I'll cooperate with the lender's fraud department." He nodded. "I will make sure you receive the appropriate contact information." Lauren let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Look at you, acting so powerful because you got a diploma today." I looked down at the award folder under my arm, then back at her. "No, I'm acting like someone who finally understands what her signature is worth." Her face hardened. The crying stopped completely. What replaced it was something uglier and far more honest. "You were supposed to be too desperate for us to refuse," she said. The words slipped out before she could dress them up. Nobody spoke. Ryan slowly pulled his arm out of her grip. My mother closed her eyes. My father looked as if he had aged 10 years in a second. I felt the last chain break. "So that was the plan," I said. "Miss my graduation, make me feel unwanted, then call me here in front of everyone and hope I'd do anything to belong." Lauren's silence confirmed it. I picked up my bouquet from the patio table where I had set it down. The flowers were slightly crushed now, but they were still mine. "Congratulations, Lauren," I said. "Everything is official now." Then I turned and walked toward the gate, leaving my family behind me with the truth they had created. I had almost reached the side path when Ryan called my name. I stopped, not because I owed him anything, but because his voice did not sound angry at me. It sounded like someone who had just realized the floor beneath him was not solid. When I turned, he was standing a few feet away from Lauren, his face pale, one hand still half raised, as if he had been about to reach for her and changed his mind. "Did you really have no idea about the loan?" he asked. "No," I said. "I found out during my graduation ceremony." His eyes flicked to the diploma cover under my arm, then to my mother. "You all knew she was graduating today?" Nobody answered fast enough. Lauren tried to step toward him. "Ryan, please don't let her twist this. She's making it sound worse than it is, because she wants to punish me." I looked at him and said, "Ask her why I wasn't invited here." Ryan turned back to Lauren. "You told me Maya couldn't come because she didn't support us." Lauren's lips parted, but no answer came. My mother rushed in before the silence became too damaging. "Ryan, sweetheart, this is a very emotional family issue. Maya has always had complicated feelings about Lauren." I almost smiled at that. Even now, my mother was trying to turn a forged signature into sibling jealousy. Mr. Alden stepped forward before Ryan could respond. "Mrs. Collins, I need to be clear. The lender cannot proceed with this event, this closing, or any related approval discussion today. There is a disputed signature, an unauthorized inquiry report, and a direct statement from the named co-applicant that she did not consent." The words hit the patio harder than shouting would have. Guests exchanged glances. Someone near the drink table quietly set down a glass. Ryan's father stared at Lauren with the kind of cold disappointment that did not need volume. Lauren's face crumpled again. "I can explain," Ryan's father said. "Then explain why we were told Maya had already agreed." Lauren looked at Mom. That tiny glance ruined her more than any confession could have. Ryan saw it. So did his father. So did half the backyard. My mother's polished expression collapsed for a second before she pulled it back into place. "I believed Maya would help," Mom said. "No," I said. "You believed I could be pressured." Mom turned on me. "You are enjoying this." I held her gaze. "No, I'm documenting it." That made her stop. I lifted my phone just enough for her to understand I had not walked in unprepared. I was not recording faces or trying to create a spectacle, but I had saved the credit alert, the messages, the timeline, and the lender's fraud intake call record. For once, my mother could not erase what happened by calling it a misunderstanding later. Ryan looked at Lauren. "What else did you lie about?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. His father's eyes narrowed. "Lauren." She swallowed. "I may have exaggerated some of her loat, to Lee. Like loat. Ryan's voice lowered. "What things?" "What only because everyone expects you to have everything figured out before anyone gives you a chance." Ryan's voice lowered. "What things?" Lauren looked trapped. "The business was real." Ryan repeated. "Was?" She corrected herself quickly. "It is real. It just needed funding." Mr. Alden opened the folder again, not to help her, but because the facts were now the only clean thing left on that patio. The application stated that Lauren had completed a business management degree and had 2 years of operating revenue from a private catering company. Ryan slowly turned to her. "You told me you finished your degree," Lauren whispered. "I was close," I said. "You dropped out after 1 semester." Her eyes flashed toward me. "Shut up, Maya." The old command had no power now. It only made everyone look at her more closely. Ryan's father asked, "And the catering revenue?" Lauren's mouth trembled. "I did events," I answered. "Birthday cakes for friends are not operating revenue." Jason muttered, "Maya, enough." I looked at him. "You were drinking beer under a banner while I walked alone today. You don't get to decide when enough starts." He looked away. Ryan stepped back another pace. So the degree was a lie, the revenue was a lie, and Maya's consent was a lie. Lauren's tears came again, but this time, no one moved to comfort her except my mother. Mom wrapped an arm around her and glared at the rest of the patio, as if they were all being cruel for noticing reality. She made mistakes because she was desperate, Mom said. People with real families understand that you protect your own. Ryan's father's voice turned colder. My family was nearly pulled into a fraudulent financial arrangement. Do not lecture me about protection. The investors near the covered display began speaking quietly among themselves. One of them, a woman in a gray suit who had not said a word until then, closed her notebook and looked at Ryan's father. We're out, Lauren jerked toward her. No, please. You haven't even seen the full concept, the woman said. We have seen enough. Another man beside her nodded. We were told there was verified collateral, a clean guarantor, and family-backed stability. What we are seeing is misrepresentation, Mom snapped. This is one mistake. Mr. Alden replied. It is several. The patio went silent again. Lauren stared at the covered display, the one she had probably planned to reveal in front of applause and admiration. With a shaking hand, she pulled the cloth away herself, as if showing everyone the dream might save it. Underneath was a glossy sign with her proposed company name, gold letters printed across white foam board. There were sample menus, staged product photos, and a framed mock-up of a storefront that did not exist yet. For 1 second, I almost felt sorry for her, not because she was innocent, but because the dream looked so childish beneath all the lying. She had wanted the image of success without building the foundation. She had wanted applause first and responsibility later. And my family had taught her that if she cried hard enough, someone else would carry the cost. Ryan looked at the sign, then at her. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? Lauren's voice broke. After it worked, he said. That's not truth. That's cleanup. She reached for him again. I did this for us. He pulled away. No. You did this for the version of yourself you wanted everyone to believe in. Mom stepped forward. Ryan, don't make a rash decision. Lauren loves you. Ryan looked at my mother with quiet disgust. And you helped her use your other daughter to prove it. That finally silenced my mother. Dad tried to speak then, but his voice came out weak. Maybe everyone should go home and cool off. Aunt Denise, who had been standing near the dessert table, said softly, David, this is not something you cool off from. It was the first time anyone in my extended family had said anything in my defense. It was small, late, and not enough to undo anything, but it still landed somewhere inside me. Ryan removed something from his pocket. At first I thought it was his phone, but then I saw the small velvet box. Lauren saw it too, and her expression changed from panic to terror. You were going to propose today? She whispered. Ryan did not answer her directly. He looked at the ruined display, the stunned guests, the attorney's folder, then at me standing near the gate with my diploma and crushed flowers. I was, he said. Lauren covered her mouth. Ryan, please. He closed the box and put it back into his pocket. I need you and your family to leave me alone. Mom gasped as if he had insulted her, but Lauren made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a dramatic sob, not a performance, but a raw, frightened noise from someone watching the life she had staged disappear in real time. The investors left first. Then Ryan's father walked out with Mr. Alden, speaking in a low voice about formal notices and withdrawal of interest. Guests began gathering purses, jackets, and children. Nobody looked at the food anymore. Nobody touched the cupcakes. The banner that said, Lauren's Big New Beginning, shifted in the breeze above a backyard that now felt like the scene of an accident. Mom turned toward me one last time. Are you happy now? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw that she still did not understand. She thought the collapse had started when I refused to lie. She could not accept that it had started the moment they decided my consent did not matter. No, I said, but I'm free. Then I walked through the gate. Behind me, Lauren was crying, Ryan was gone, the investors were leaving, and my mother was calling my name with a desperation she had never used at my graduation. This time, I did not turn around. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking. Not while I was standing in front of Lauren, not while my mother accused me of enjoying her humiliation, not even when I saw my own forged signature on a loan application for nearly $500,000. It happened only after I closed the car door and the noise of the ruined barbecue became muffled behind the glass. My diploma cover sat on the passenger seat beside the crushed bouquet, and for the first time all day, I let myself breathe like someone who had survived something. My phone lit up before I could start the engine. Mom called twice. Jason called once. Dad sent a message that said, "Please don't leave like this." I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for anger to rise again, but what I felt was worse than anger. It was exhaustion. They still thought leaving was the problem. Not the empty seats, not the forged signature, not the way they had tried to trap me in front of strangers. In their minds, the damage began when I refused to protect the lie. I did not answer any of them. Instead, I called Professor Walker. She picked up on the second ring, and before she could ask, I said, "It was forged." Her voice became steady and practical. "Are you safe?" I looked through the windshield at Lauren's house. Guests were still walking out, some whispering, some glancing back toward the patio, as if they had witnessed a crime scene in daylight. "Yes," I said. "I'm in my car." She told me not to go home yet if my family knew where I lived, to drive somewhere public, and to begin protecting myself immediately. So I drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away and sat in the farthest booth from the door with my graduation dress still on. I placed fraud alerts with the credit bureaus. I froze my credit. I wrote down a timeline while everything was fresh: the missed ceremony, Lauren's Instagram stories, the credit alert, Mom's calls, Mr. Alden's question, Lauren admitting she planned to tell me after approval. I wrote it all like I had been trained to do, without dramatic language, without trying to make anyone look worse than their own actions already did. By the time I finished, my phone had become a wall of messages. Mom's were the longest. She wrote that I had embarrassed the family, that Lauren was inconsolable, that Ryan had left and would not answer her calls, that his father had withdrawn every connection he had promised. Then came the sentence I expected: "I hope you understand what you have done." I read it twice, then typed one reply. "No, Mom, I understand what I stopped." After that, I muted her. Jason sent, "You could have handled it privately." I replied, "They forged my name publicly enough to invite investors." He did not respond. Caleb sent only, "I didn't know about the signature." I wanted to believe him, but wanting to believe people had kept me trapped for years, so I answered with the only thing I could say honestly. "Then learn from this." Dad called again. I let it ring until it stopped. That evening, Mr. Alden emailed me the formal contact information for the lender's fraud review team. His message was short, professional, and careful, but one sentence stood out. "Based on today's statements, the application will not proceed and has been referred for internal investigation." I read that line several times, not because it made me happy, but because it made the danger real. They had not almost borrowed a small favor from me. They had almost attached my name to a business built on lies. The consequences came quickly after that. By Monday morning, the lender requested a signed affidavit stating that I had not authorized the application. I submitted it with screenshots of the credit alert and my mother's messages. By Tuesday, the business loan was formally denied. By Wednesday, Ryan's father sent notice through Mr. Alden that his family was withdrawing from any financial or personal arrangement connected to Lauren's proposed company. He did not accuse me of anything. He did not ask me to soften my statement. He simply wrote, through legal language, that their involvement had been based on false representations. Lauren did what Lauren always did when reality refused to comfort her. She turned herself into the victim. She posted a vague message online about betrayal, jealousy, and people who can't stand to see you rise. For maybe an hour, a few people commented with hearts. Then someone who had been at the barbecue replied, Is this about the fake loan documents? The post disappeared 10 minutes later. By the end of the week, the story had spread through the family faster than my graduation announcement ever had. Aunt Denise called me first. I expected another lecture about forgiveness, but she surprised me. I should have said something sooner, she told me. Her voice sounded older than I remembered. Not just at the barbecue, years ago. I did not know what to do with that apology. It was late, and it did not fix anything, but it was the first one that did not ask me to give something back in exchange. Ryan texted me once. He said he was sorry for believing Lauren's version of me. He told me she had claimed I was distant, resentful, and too proud to support her. She had told him I skipped family events because I thought I was better than them. She had never mentioned that I worked through school, helped when they called, or had a graduation on the same day as her announcement. I should have asked more questions, he wrote. I stared at the message for a while before answering. So should a lot of people. He did not ask me to forgive Lauren. That made his apology easier to accept. My mother was the only one who grew angrier as the truth became clearer. When blame stopped working, she tried guilt. When guilt failed, she tried fear. She left voicemails saying Lauren could face charges, that Ryan had ended the engagement, that the investors were gone, that my father had not slept in 2 nights. Every message treated those consequences like things I had created. Not once did she say Lauren should not have signed my name. Not once did she say she should have come to my graduation. Her closest thing to an apology was a text that said, "I am sorry you felt unsupported, but you went too far." I saved that one too. On Friday evening, Dad came to my apartment. I saw him through the peephole holding a small gift bag, the kind people buy when they want the wrapping to do the work of remorse. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. He looked at the gap between us and seemed hurt by it, which almost made me laugh. The chain had been there for years. He was only noticing it now because it was made of metal instead of silence. "Your mother wanted me to bring this," he said, lifting the bag. "It's for your graduation." I looked at it. She missed the ceremony. "I know." "You missed it too." His shoulders sank. "I know." For a second, I thought he might finally say something that mattered. Instead, he whispered, "Can't you just talk to her? Lauren is falling apart." I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them. "Dad, I almost lost my future because none of you could tell Lauren no." He looked down. "I didn't think it would go that far." "That is the problem. You never think silence goes anywhere." He had no answer. I did not take the gift bag. After he left, he placed it by the door anyway. I waited until his car was gone, then picked it up and looked inside. There was a generic graduation card with $40 in cash and a message in my mother's handwriting. "We are still your family." I put the cash back inside, sealed the envelope, and mailed it to them the next morning with no note. The following week, Professor Walker called while I was leaving work. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. My stomach tightened out of habit, because urgent phone calls had not been kind to me lately. "Not yet," I said. "Should I be?" For the first time since graduation day, I heard her smile. "The firm reviewed everything, your practicum, your interview, and the way you documented what happened with the loan. They want to make the offer official." I stopped walking in the middle of the sidewalk. "Junior fraud analyst," she said. "Full-time. Benefits. They want you to start next month." The city moved around me, cars passing, people talking, life continuing like ordinary miracles happened every day. I looked at my reflection in a dark shop window and saw someone tired, yes, but standing. Someone no longer waiting in an auditorium for people who had already chosen someone else. Professor Walker said, "Maya, are you there?" I swallowed hard. "I'm here." "Good," she said. "Because this is the part where your real life starts." That night, for the first time since graduation, I took my diploma cover out of my bag and placed it on my desk. Beside it, I placed the award folder and the printed job offer that arrived in my email an hour later. My family had missed the moment I walked across the stage, but they had not stopped it from meaning something. They had only taught me who did not deserve a seat in the next chapter. Mình đã rút gọn phần 10, bỏ các ý bị lặp như nhắc đi nhắc lại việc gia đình không đến lễ tốt nghiệp, lặp nhiều lần ý Maya không cần sự công nhận, mô tả quá dài về công việc mới. Bản dưới đây tập trung vào hậu quả cuối cùng, sự trưởng thành của Maya, phản diện chịu kết cục xứng đáng, và câu kết cảm xúc. The official job offer arrived 3 days after the lender accepted my fraud dispute. I printed it and placed it beside my diploma, the Walker Merit Award, and the copy of my signed affidavit. For most people, those papers might have looked like ordinary documents. To me, they were proof that my life had not ended in Lauren's backyard. My family had tried to use my name as a tool, but my name was still mine. My future was still mine. I started at the fraud investigation firm the following month. On my first morning, I arrived too early, wearing a navy blazer I had bought on clearance and carrying a notebook full of questions. I expected to feel out of place, but when Professor Walker met me in the lobby with coffee, she smiled and said, "You earned this, Maya. Walk in like you know that." No one in my family had said anything like that on graduation day. Strangely, hearing it from someone who had no obligation to love me made it feel more honest. The work was difficult, but it made sense to me. I reviewed payment records, traced fake vendors, checked signatures, and learned how fraud often began with small excuses. Someone needed help. Someone deserved a chance. Someone said it was only temporary. The words sounded familiar because my family had used them for years. Lauren had not become a liar in one afternoon. She had been trained to believe that if she wanted something badly enough, someone else should pay the cost. The consequences for her came faster than she expected. The lender formally denied the loan. Ryan's father withdrew every financial connection he had promised. The investors refused to return her calls. Ryan ended the engagement and sent back the gifts my mother had been bragging about for months. Lauren deleted her business page after one of the guests commented under her vague post about betrayal and asked if she meant the fake loan documents. For the first time in her life, crying did not fix what she had broken. My mother tried to control the story, but there were too many witnesses. She told relatives that I had overreacted, that Lauren had only made a paperwork mistake, that I had always been jealous of my sister. But people had heard Lauren admit she planned to tell me after the approval. They had heard Mom ask me to say I agreed. They had seen Mr. Alden close the file and the investors walk out. My mother had spent years making me look difficult. This time, the truth had an audience. That was her real punishment. Not screaming, not dramatic revenge, just the loss of control. Relatives who used to tell me to be patient began calling to ask why no one had gone to my graduation. Aunt Denise apologized for staying silent for too long. Jason stopped joking whenever my name came up. Caleb admitted he had not known about the forged signature, but he also admitted he should have questioned why everyone was hiding the party from me. I did not comfort any of them. Their guilt was not my responsibility. Dad came to my apartment once with a small graduation gift bag. I opened the door but kept the chain on. He looked tired, smaller somehow, holding the bag like it could repair everything he had refused to stop. "Your mother wanted me to bring this," he said. I looked at him and answered, "She missed the ceremony." His eyes dropped. "I know." Then I said, "You missed it too." For a second, I thought he might finally defend me without being forced. Instead, he whispered, "Lauren is falling apart." That was when I understood that my father's silence had never been neutral. It had always protected whoever demanded the most and hurt whoever endured the most. I told him, "I almost lost my future because none of you could tell Lauren no." He said he had not thought it would go that far. I answered, "That is the problem. You never think silence goes anywhere." I did not take the gift bag. After he left it by my door anyway, I mailed it back unopened. A few weeks later, my new supervisor invited me to dinner with Professor Walker and 2 people from the firm. I almost refused because celebration still felt unfamiliar. In my family, every kind gesture came with a hidden debt. But that dinner was simple. No speeches, no performance, no one asking me to give up anything. Just warm food, easy conversation, and people who were proud of me without needing to own me. Professor Walker raised her glass and said, "To Maya, who earned her place before she believed she had one." I smiled, and for once, I did not feel embarrassed to be seen. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Can we meet? I want my daughter back." I stared at the words for a while. They should have hurt more than they did. Maybe they would have a month earlier, but now I understood what she meant. She did not want to know the woman I had become. She wanted back the daughter who answered every call, swallowed every insult, and sacrificed on command. I set the phone down and finished dinner. Later that night, outside the restaurant, I replied, "You don't want me back. You want the version of me who stayed quiet. She is gone." Her answer came almost instantly. "After everything I did for this family, this is how you treat me?" I looked at the screen and felt sad, but not guilty. I typed, "No, this is how I stop letting you treat me that way." Then I blocked her number. I did not know if it would be forever. I only knew it had to be for now. For the first time in my life, my mother's urgency did not become my emergency. Lauren's collapse did not become my assignment. My father's regret did not become my burden. I went home, placed my phone on the desk, and looked at the diploma I had once hoped my family would celebrate. The frame was simple, but it looked beautiful there, under the small lamp, beside the job offer that would pay my rent and the award that carried my name correctly. A few days later, the graduation photos arrived by email. I expected them to hurt, but they didn't. In one picture, I was crossing the stage. In another, I was holding the Walker Merit Award. There were no parents in the frame, no siblings cheering, no mother wiping proud tears from her eyes. But when I looked closely, I realized I was smiling. Not because the day had been perfect. It had been painful, humiliating, and cruel. But I had still walked. I had still earned my degree. I had still chosen myself before they could make me disappear into Lauren's needs again. Lauren lost the fiancé, the investors, the business, and the perfect image she had built with my name. My mother lost the story she used to control everyone. My father lost the daughter, who once mistook his silence for peace. And I lost the desperate hope that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, and forgave enough, they would finally choose me. That was the loss that set me free. On my first Friday at the firm, I stayed late to finish a report. When I turned off my desk lamp, the office windows reflected the city behind me. For once, I did not see the girl waiting beside empty seats. I saw a woman who had walked across a stage alone and kept walking. That day, I didn't just graduate from college. I graduated from begging my family to love me.